Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about pentatonic scales that can be built out of the scales we've covered so far in this section. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 6.18 from our series Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So as you know, a pentatonic scale is any scale that's built with 5 notes. That's what pentatonic means. And I showed you in a previous lesson how you could take the major scale modes and build pentatonic scales out of them, and that would just create simpler scales that you can play that have the essential notes of each of those modes. So they're easier to memorize, easier to play, and then they bring out the sounds of those modes without having to worry about all the other notes. Plus it just gives a more unique sound than playing the whole scale over those chords. In this lesson, we're going to do the same thing with the scales we covered in this section, and we're going to talk about the melodic minor scale, the Lydian flat 7 scale, which is the 4th mode of the melodic minor scale, the altered scale, which is the 7th mode of melodic minor, the harmonic minor scale, Phrygian dominant, which is the 5th mode of harmonic minor, the whole half, the half whole, and the whole tone. Those are the most important scales that we've talked about and the most important modes from those scales that we've talked about in this section. And you don't have to learn these are just giving you another option for playing scales or for taking fuller scales and turning them into pentatonic scales, which creates unique sounds, can also make them easier to play in a lot of cases and easier to memorize while bringing out the essential tones of those scales. But don't think you have to learn these are just an option that you can use. And there's more options than what I'm showing you for what you can create for pentatonic scales out of these scales. Not all of these are very common, so if you come up with your own, that's fine too. I'm just showing you ones that I've seen or used. So we're going to start with melodic minor, and we're just going to start with pattern 1. We're going to show these all in pattern 1 just like we did with the modes. And in the e-guide, I'll show you all the patterns that you can memorize. And hopefully you remember the melodic minor scale is root 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A way we can get a melodic minor pentatonic out of this scale would be to remove the 2 and the 6, and we would end up with melodic minor pentatonic pattern 1. That's what's shown, and that would be root, flat 3, 4, 5, 7, root. And you can see it's really close to the minor pentatonic scale. The only difference is that you take the minor pentatonic scale and move the 7 up half a step, and you would end up with the melodic minor pentatonic scale. And that can be a really interesting, fun scale to use that can create really unique sounds if you use it. So try that out, see if you like that. The next scale we're going to look at is Lydian flat 7. Like I said, that's the 4th mode of the melodic minor scale, and it's a common mode. That's why we're looking at this one. And the Lydian flat 7 scale, if you remember, is root 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Again, to get to a pentatonic scale from this, we can remove the 2 and the 6, and that would give us root 3, sharp 4, 5, flat 7. And that would be a really interesting Lydian flat 7 pentatonic scale that you could use. And again, this is still similar to the minor pentatonic scale. It's just you're raising the flat 3 half a step to the major 3 and the 4 up half a step to the sharp 4. And hopefully you know that the sharp 4 is also the flat 5, which is a blues note in minor blues, so it can add a pretty cool sound using this scale. The next one we're going to take is the altered scale, which is a really common scale, important scale from the melodic minor, and it's the 7th mode of the melodic minor scale. And hopefully you remember the altered scale is root, flat 9, sharp 9, 3, flat 5, sharp 5, flat 7. One option for an altered scale that's a pentatonic scale, you could remove the sharp 5 and the sharp 9, and then you'd end up with root, flat 9, 3, flat 5, flat 7. So that would give you the altered tones of flat 9 and flat 5. Or instead you can have the sharp 9 and sharp 5, because those are altered tones as well. So move those back up to sharp 5 and sharp 9. That would be another way you could play this. So either one just brings out different altered tones, and those are really important tones when you're using the altered scale. So you have options for doing it either way. And what's on your screen right now with the sharp 5 and sharp 9 is closer to the minor pentatonic scale, so it'd probably be easier to learn. You would just sharp the 5, and you could consider it flatting the 4, because minor pentatonic you'd have a 4 here, you just flat that 1/2 step, would go to the 3, and normally you have a 5 here, you just sharp that to the sharp 5. And that's because a sharp 9 is also a flat 3, which is in the minor pentatonic scale. But if you view it compared to the minor pentatonic scale, it's probably easier to memorize. Next one we're going to take is harmonic minor scale, which hopefully you know is root 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, 7. To get to a harmonic pentatonic scale, we could take out the 2 and the 4, and that would give us root, flat 3, 5, flat 6, 7. And that's a cool harmonic pentatonic scale that you could use. The next scale is Phrygian dominant, which is the 5th mode of the harmonic minor scale, which is the most common mode out of the harmonic minor scale besides just the one starting on the root, which is harmonic minor. And hopefully you remember that's root, flat 9, 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. To get to a pentatonic scale from here, you could remove the 5 and the 4, and then you'd end up with root, flat 9, 3, flat 6, flat 7. And I just rearranged some of these intervals from different strings just so you end up with 2 notes per string. Because usually it's nice to have 2 notes per string when you're talking about pentatonic scales to keep it similar to the minor pentatonic scale or the major pentatonic scale. So that's a way you can make the Phrygian dominant into a pentatonic and get really cool sounds. The next scale is whole half diminished scale, which is root 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, sharp 5, double flat 7. This one you have to remove more notes since this scale is actually 8 notes instead of 7 notes. So you could remove the 2, the 4, and the 7, and that would give you a pentatonic scale you could use for whole half, which would end up being root, flat 3, flat 5, sharp 5, double flat 7, which would be a really cool sound. And if you're viewing this compared to the minor pentatonic, you'd raise the 4 half a step, raise the 5 half a step, lower the flat 7 half a step, and that would give you this shape. So you can compare it back to minor pentatonic, make it a little easier. The next scale is half whole diminished scale, another really important diminished scale, and that's root, flat 2, sharp 9, 3, flat 5, 5, 6, flat 7. Again, it's 8 notes, so you have to remove 3 of the notes to make it pentatonic. So you could remove the sharp 9, flat 5, and 6, and that would give you a half whole diminished pentatonic scale pattern, which would be root, flat 9, 3, 5, flat 7, which would be a really neat, cool sound. And this is also known as a 7, flat 9 pentatonic scale. A lot of times it'll be called that because that's the sound you're really creating. And if you remember when I was talking about half whole before, the 7, flat 9 is really the sound of that scale. So it's an important sound to get from it. And then the last scale we're going to cover is a whole tone scale, and that's root 2, 3, flat 5, sharp 5, flat 7. This scale is only a 6-note scale, so you only have to remove one note to get it down to a pentatonic scale. And if you remove the 2, then you'd end up with root 3, flat 5, sharp 5, flat 7, and that would give you a really cool pentatonic scale you could use for the whole tone scale. And if you viewed this from the minor pentatonic scale, you're just raising the flat 3 half a step and raising the 4 half a step to flat 5 and raising the 5 half a step to sharp 5. And that would be how you could visualize it compared to the minor pentatonic scale. So those are ways you can take the more advanced scales and turn them into pentatonic scales. Like I said, you can come up with your own options and get different sounds out of them, but these are a little more common than other options. But as a whole, these as pentatonic scales aren't that common to begin with. They're definitely done, they're definitely used in a lot of more advanced music, but it's not as common as turning other scales into pentatonic scales. So don't think you have to learn these. These are just options for what you can do. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk about interval shapes using upper intervals. And be sure to download the e-guide. All the diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we add at least one new lesson every day.